Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas, sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Moffet, and I'm in Burrowing, New South Wales, about an hour and a half outside of Sydney. I'm talking in yesterday's time to Dr. Michael Neal, who's in Holly in Pennsylvania, which is in the United States, and it's Sunday night there. It's Monday, coming up to Monday lunchtime here. Michael, welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Dr. David, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Briefly, I was introduced to you. You have a very unique service. Now, you're an optometrist, but you run a very successful business, Build My Team, and you have found a niche way to provide good staff for dental practices, medical practices, allied medical practices. So, Michael, welcome to the program. Tell us how Build My Team started, and tell us what Build My Team is.
Well, sounds good. So, Build My Team's a service, like you had said, that focuses on private practices. We're in 10 different types of healthcare professions, but the key similarity is they're all private practices. And what we figured out how to do was to hire people without using resumes. That's the clincher for Build My Team. So I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But right off the bat, how did we get started? Well, like so many of your listeners, it was born out of desperation, necessity. As you can tell, I don't have much hair left. So that was all pulled out from hiring problems in the practice. I'm in private practice with my wife, and we had every conceivable hiring problem that a practice can have. So took a look at how do we get out of this mess, really, and looked at how really successful organizations are doing their hiring, like the Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, Disney, those types of companies. And what we found is that they don't hire the same way that the rest of us do. They are hiring completely upside down and using a different approach. So we took that approach, kind of reverse engineered it, did a whole bunch of customization so it would work really, really well in healthcare. And we started hiring people the new way.
What's the old way, which was obviously causing immediate hair loss, and what's the new way?
Yeah. Well, interesting question. The old way is using resumes. And you say, well, how the heck are you going to hire somebody without using a resume? It's actually straightforward. What resumes do is they will tell you all about what the person's done in the past. They are very rarely, if ever nowadays, accurate, honest, and they are expected to be embellished, you name it. I'm not a pessimist. I'm the exact opposite. But I'm here to tell you that if you think that the resumes that are floating over your desk are accurate or anything close to that, those days are over. It's simply over. So when it comes to hiring with resumes, they will produce the same results you're used to getting. essentially. And anybody in private practice nowadays knows that those results are getting harder and harder and
Yeah,
harder to get
yeah.
good people.
I had a friend a few years ago telling me that she received two resumes that were identical from two different people.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
Oh boy.
but
That's a new one. I haven't heard that one
these
before,
were
but yeah,
overseas
that's pretty rough.
dentist graduates
Wow.
from a university in another country, and they were identical. Yeah, so
Wow.
that I guess is support for not using resumes anymore, because they do tend to gild the lily a bit, don't they?
They sure do.
Yeah.
That's a good term
So
for it. Yeah.
if that's the old way and we've got to throw that way out, what's the new way? Obviously, you can't sit and interview people without a screening process. So there must be some new form of screening process.
Right. Yeah, there sure is. And what those other companies were doing is they were hiring upside down. They weren't looking for people who can do the job. Now follow me on this because it's a big distinction. They were looking for people who could not do the job out of all of the applicants. So they would take all the people who couldn't do the job and they would remove them from their process. And they would continue to refine. Imagine a great big funnel, and they would refine this applicant funnel until the ones left over were worth talking to. And that's what we built. So the dental version of this is that we have a filtration process for these applicants that starts off with creating a job ad for the practice. Well, it starts off with a discussion with the practice. That's the main thing. And then our team writes the job ad. We write it using very specific language that's designed to elicit the types of candidates we want in the first place. And when those candidates start applying we publish this ad to 22 different job boards, and then the candidates start applying right away. So as soon as they apply, like within 5 seconds of them applying, they get a text. And the text is greeting them from your practice, and it's inviting them to walk through our screening process. So this machine that we built is 24/7, 365 days a year, and you would be very surprised by how many people are applying in the middle of the night and on all these god awful hours, that type of thing. But what it does is it figures out who the people are that can do the job. And the way that it does that is based upon their natural strengths and talents. Our screening process determines what they're naturally good at. Most people are not naturally good at the positions you want them to be good at in a dental practice. So those folks gently exit the process. But as we go through, it gets more and more specific. And what we're doing is we're matching those strengths and talents to your job ad. Here's what, let's say, a dental assistant would need, or a dental secretary, or a biller, those types of positions. It doesn't matter what. We don't do doctors. Right off the bat, everybody's salivating. These guys can get me a terrific dentist. No, we don't do doctors. And in the US, we generally do not do the licensed positions, but the unlicensed positions, absolutely positively. We aren't looking for people with experience. That's another thing that throws folks in the dental industry. The reason being is we find that folks with experience are generally more problematic for hiring purposes than folks without it. And how can we possibly say that? Well, one of the things and I can show you this as well. One of the things we're testing is their speed of learning. So we're going to figure out how fast they learn, what their natural strengths and talents are, and then match them to that position.
Wow, that really is counterintuitive. And often, as you would know, Michael, and I've seen in business, sometimes it's the counterintuitive way of doing business that sets the market leaders apart from their competitors. So, Zappa was a great example, in how they answered the phone and selling shoes online. Very counterintuitive, but very successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason this works so well is, I mean, there's a couple. First of all, it's automated. Second, it's incredibly fast. And today's hiring environment must be quick, or else you will lose what we call the A players. And those are the folks, every practice has one. You sweat bullets thinking about losing that employee in your practice because they do the work of three people, sometimes more, that type of thing. So we're able to find those folks, and I'd love to walk you through the specifics of this. But the way we get them, it's predictable, it's reliable, it's repeatable, and it can be done very quickly. And so that's a complete game changer for practices. And boy, talk about competitiveness. You are differentiating your dental practice completely from especially other dental practices in your area. But not only that, you're differentiating from the other private practices. So whether we realize it or not, we're competing against medical doctors, eye doctors, chiropractors, all kinds of allied health professions. The reason being is that when these applicants are applying for these roles, they're not in love with dentistry or whatever the private practice is. Okay. They don't have a deep love for the clinical side of things like we all do. They're applying because they want a stable position, working in an air-conditioned office, ideally not digging holes all day or having somebody throw their deli meat at them because they misunderstood the order. All of these types of problems exist in administrative or sometimes a little bit higher than an entry-level job. And so it becomes very attractive for these folks to have a position like this, but they don't necessarily care if it's the dentist or the medical doctor down the street.
How do you find the numbers applying for jobs in dental, or do you not tell them that it's a job in dental?
Oh, it's the way that it's positioned is your practice is doing this. And our team does it all for you behind the scenes. So just a quick caveat, this can happen so quickly that an average dental practice might have 30 minutes into the initial discussion with our team so we can understand what's going on in your practice, the hours, who you're looking for, that type of thing, and then about a half an hour more. So you can actually hire these people with about an hour's worth of network. And that's because this automation, the service that we provide, is running in the background all the time.
That certainly makes the decision to hire a very positive one, because a lot of practice owners are just terrified of the workload of hiring.
Oh, workload. Where do you even start? I mean, you will spend all kinds of time. Like time's the most important thing there is to me. Not this isn't an expensive service. It's shockingly affordable, but the time. You think in terms of your practice, and I have something really kind of neat to show you that will spell this out if you would
share your screen.
allow me to. Okay, so this is basically a PDF that our clients get, and this is all live and generated by the software. So it shows you the process of how we do this. And as I mentioned, the job ad is created in discussion with the practice owner. It's published at 22 different job boards, all automatically, and then all these people start coming in. Okay, one after another after another. Each of them is invited to participate in the screening process. Most of them don't. Now, here's another caveat. They're like, well, why don't they participate in the screening process? Because they want nothing to do with getting off the couch and working to try and get a job. They have no interest in that. Can you imagine how big of a time waster that alone is in a practice? You're going to print out all these resumes. You'll sweat bullets trying to figure out who to call, who to text, whatever. And then you reach out to them and they ghost you, right? With our process, that doesn't happen. I mean, very occasionally, but almost never. And as you can see from this, we're receiving oodles of applications. We're rejecting almost all of them. So in this example, out of 300, 280 were rejected. And then out of the potential candidates, it shows you the rejection reasons, shows you the finalist candidates, how much work was completed. But here's the kicker. So, David, a dental practice, let's say it's doing $1.5 million a year, whether it's Australian dollars or American dollars, the point's the same. That works out to about $735 per hour of the doctor's time. Now, if the doc is doing this or has anything to do with the hiring process, that's what it's costing. That doctor time could be spent on, well, virtually anything else to build a practice. So on average, it would have cost the practice $26,000 and change in doctor time to have the doctor do the hiring themselves. And you say, that's ridiculous. It's a crazy amount of money. That's what the practice is spending if the doctor's doing it. And, our process ratchets that down to about an hour. So it's a colossal difference in the amount of time that the practice is spending.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Any thoughts on that?
$26,000. That's almost 1 year's salary.
Well, you have to think about it in terms of the doctor time. Yeah. When the dentist is doing this themselves in $1.5 million practice, I mean, let's say it's not $1.5 million. Let's say it's a $1 million practice. Who cares? Look at how big that number is. It's still a ridiculous number. But as docs, a lot of times we don't think in terms of opportunity cost. And this is a crystal clear example of how much it costs when the opportunity to grow your practice is instead spent on the team members. And you don't have to anymore because that's what Build My Team does.
Like I said to you last week, to use that famous movie line, you had me at hello when you showed me that, and just saving time.
Well, and yeah, just going through this, I mean, here's another example with a resume. What's fictional Nancy Peters good at? Well, she's claiming to have skills. Okay, maybe not. You don't know. And when you hire this type of person through a traditional approach, you won't know until it's too late. You take the risk. Nancy is not taking the risk in this relationship. So all kinds of different jobs. The thing is, the point of this is it doesn't say much. You have no clue what Nancy is good at. Okay, you have no clue what her natural strengths and talents are. Zippo. The reason being is a resume doesn't tell you that. It just gives a work history that is usually embellished at best. So why is this eye doctor droning on about this is a pretty solid question to ask right now. Well, because it doesn't have to be that way. This is what we call our insight report, and this is the outcome of the candidates going through our process. We start off by measuring their mindset. We want to make sure that they have a healthcare mindset, that they like to help people, that they have initiative, team player, their results focused, all kinds of stuff. If they pass this, and a lot of them don't, they move on to the next thing. And the next thing is measuring their speed of learning. Now, why is this so important? This is one of the top predictors of success in a private practice. But there are caveats to this. You can't have somebody, like if you look at this kind of protractor arc shape, you can't have somebody all the way to the right, bottom right. That person is incredibly smart. They should probably be a doctor, be the dentist themselves, but they're not going to stick around in your practice. They're gone after maybe a month, maybe 2, because they're going to find out in a real hurry that it's not challenging enough for them. So you're going to have all this money and time plugged into this person, and worst, you're going to get really, really excited about them because they're so capable, and they're gone. The other side of it is anything on the left-hand side of this from vertical doesn't work out. And it gets obviously progressively worse. If you have somebody who learns too slowly, you're not going to ever get them up to speed. Like these are the people who take months. You're going over the same thing over and over again, and they just like bang on their head. They just don't get it. So what we're looking for is the sweet spot. Just the first one to the right of vertical and the second one to the right of the vertical. And that's where the sweet spot is. Those folks come in, they learn incredibly quickly. They stay because it does have a challenge for them, and they become folks that the practice just absolutely loves.
Yeah. So you've worked out the sweet spot, and then you just discard anybody who doesn't fall into that sweet spot. Whereas a lot of employers will interview anyway,
Yeah.
just in case there's a glimmer of hope that they might actually have some minor characteristic that puts them in the sweet spot, but it's only minor.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You got a glimmer of hope. Oh boy, you nailed it, David. Hiring is so hard in a healthcare practice because you just generally don't have a laundry list of people clamoring at your door, banging it down because they want to work in your dental practice. It's getting harder and harder, and COVID made an enormous change to healthcare hiring around the world. It wasn't just in North America or Australia. So the applicant pool has reduced, and now I hear from so many dentists that they are just flat out struggling. And it's so hard to hire. They've got some mercenaries that don't they'll leave one dental practice for another for 50 cents an hour or more, sometimes less, things like that. But you know what they're not saying, David? They're not telling you that they're losing sleep at night, or they're not telling me they're losing sleep at night. They're not telling me that on Sunday night their palms are sweating going to sleep because they're terrified of waking up Monday morning to find out what team member is not showing up that day because of some ridiculous excuse. They're Monday morning looking at your cell phone as a practice owner nowadays has got to be the most stressful time of the week. When your team isn't coming in, where there's some type of problem, and clinically you're backed up to the eyeballs. You've got your assistants that, you name it. It doesn't matter what the position is. It's essentially a never-ending problem for so many practices. And I have to say that in our practice, which Build My Team does the staffing for, that rarely happens. And it is fantastic. I don't have to sweat bullets looking at the phone or Slack
So, Michael,
before Monday morning.
Hiring, this is a bit of a left field question. Do you find that you're better to be looking for full-time employees, or say double the number of employees but have them all at part-time? Is there an ideal ratio, or is there a preference to some owners compared to other types of owners?
Yeah. I think that in general, in my experience, full-time tends to be preferred because you have fewer people, lower overhead, because each employee comes with overhead. And I don't just mean showing up in the practice, because you could have staggered schedules. What I mean is all the extra work in order to manage an employee. So most practices want full-time. Of course, there are exceptions to that, and that's one of the things we check, and I'll show you that in a minute.
I was looking at that idea from my history in dentistry, and the fact that when I graduated, people worked for 40 hours a week, and guess what? Your business was open for 40 hours a week. Now everyone's working 6 days a week in their business, but their staff are working less, and so you end up with part-timers. And more moving parts means more things can go wrong, I think.
Absolutely. And there's some stuff that we're looking for in these candidates. And by the way, this is all, I'm going to show you, just kind of walk you through this, but it's a continuum. So as you see on the screen, there's people who are warm and friendly with patients, cool and impersonal with patients. There's no right or wrong answer for these types of characteristics. It depends on the position you're hiring them for. Okay, so if you have, let's say, a biller in your back office, that's a completely different profile of the type of candidate we're looking for versus somebody, let's say, sitting at front desk or patient coordinator, that type of thing. Very different. So things that we're looking for here, are they warm and friendly? Can they manage the actions of others? Do they make exceptions to procedures and policies, or do they follow these procedures and policies consistently, I should say? Well, do you get that from a resume? Are you sitting across from somebody in an interview and let's just do it. So, Dr. David, do you follow procedures and policies consistently?
Of course I do.
What's the answer you're going to give? Of course
Yes.
I do. I've never deviated from anything in my life. Okay, terrific. Um, so we're able to get all this information, and it keeps going. Can they handle details and paperwork? Can they handle extended routine, or do they get bored by it? So things like that. If you can't handle details and paperwork, you got a real tough problem in healthcare because it's the backbone of what we do. If they're bored by extended routine, that varies per position. So let's say there's a position in your dental practice that has variability in what they do all day. Terrific. They would be a great fit. If they, in this particular example, if they can handle extended routine, you might have them doing something where it's a similar process over and over. Um, as we go down, what's their follow-up like? If they have really incomplete follow-up, again, that's a tough problem to have in the dental practice. You know, when you're talking to your team members, are you talking to them and walking around with a notepad in your pocket, jotting down each time, did this person do this task? And I have to check at the end of the day. Well, if you ever have to do that, you are hiring the wrong types of people because we require strong follow up for the positions. It's just a must in dentistry. And so we're also looking at other things like how they make decisions, what their motivation is. Are they motivated more by helping other people succeed or by individual success? That's a big distinction because in certain positions in a dental practice, you're going to want one, like people leaning towards one or the other. Do they focus on the patient and their needs, or is it more on their own delivery of the patient or of the care? And then, of course, we're looking at things like we call their working environment. So communication is a big one. I obviously talk pretty quickly. And if I'm matched up with somebody who can't handle quick communication, it's a really stressful time for them. I'm not slowing down my communication as a doctor. I talk might even speed it up in clinical times, but that has to be a good match or it just doesn't last. The one below that, do they like to work in environments that are scheduled and without interruptions, or can they handle an interruption-based environment? So imagine a front desk position. When was the last time a dentistry front desk position didn't have interruptions?
Never.
Has it ever happened since the dawn of time? Never. Right. And so you wonder why your secretaries don't stay. Why are we burning through secretaries? Well, this is one of the reasons. There's also 2 steps down. How do they handle stress? Do they handle most levels of stress or can they not handle stress? A front desk position, you have to be able to handle stress. It's the very nature of the job. And in other positions, like let's say a dental assistant, far less stressful than somebody at the front desk. And we're also looking at things like, do they need to interact with others or prefer to work alone? If you have, let's say, a dental biller who needs to interact with others, well, that's a bit of a challenge because so much of that work is by themselves. And flip it around to the opposite with the front desk person. If they prefer to work alone at the front desk, that's a bit of a tough road to hoe as well. So, as you can see, we've got oodles and oodles of information about each of these candidates. There's actually 27 pages that we know about them. This is the summary of all the information. And then we've got some more. So if you take a look at these, these are what we call the knockout questions. And like, what the heck is this guy talking about? Well, easy. Remember, it's an automated system. So take a look at the bottom one. Our office is typically open on the following days and lists the hours as well. Are there any days or times that you're unable to work? Well, guess what, David? If the answer is yes, then you're passed on by our system. You basically move out of the process. You know why? Pretty simple. Hey, Dr. David, I want to come work in your practice. I'd like to have a schedule where I work Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 2, but I'm going to need a 2-hour lunch. Does that work for you, Dr. David? Of course it doesn't, because in what we do in dentistry, it has to be in person almost all the time. Some exceptions to that, but almost all the care is delivered in person. So we're asking those types of questions up front, and it's an incredibly effective way to cut the people who are completely and utterly wasting time. We're also looking at things like, they have any prior experience in the field? If the answer is yes, our team handles that a little bit differently, and they will manually look at the resume, which is most of the time a red flag. We're also looking at things like their commute time. So in a rural area like where my practice is, the 20 minutes drive, straightforward. That's pretty reasonable. 15, 20 minutes. Now, what happens if you're in, let's say, downtown Sydney or a major American city, and it's a 20-minute commute? How many dental practices are they driving by each day
Yeah.
on the way to yours? Well, every time they're driving by, they're spending gas money, they're spending their time, and they're thinking, maybe I can get a job closer. So we want to make sure something like that works out. And each of these are designed to really make sure it works out. Also, things like their hourly income. If your practice is offering $15, $17 an hour and they're expecting 25, I don't care how you slice it, that's never going to work. But on the other hand, if they're expecting 13 bucks an hour, like this example shows, and you're willing to pay 15 to 17, our team would suggest you start them off at 14. You're going to be an absolute hero. You will endear yourself to that applicant, and they can't wait to show up for work each day because they're getting a little bit more than they ask, and nobody does that nowadays. So it really does a terrific job of out of the gate showing them what value they have.
Yeah, big difference there when you've got a little bit of negotiating wiggle room, isn't it? For sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to close my... Well, any other questions on this before
it strikes me again today, but it struck me when I met you last week and we went through this, was how easy to understand it is for the dentist wanting to employ someone. It's just a matter of just looking at what we want and learning to, I think the biggest fear again for dentists is, well, why would I hire anyone with no experience? But I've seen dentists who do that, and they continually hit winners. They get good candidates who said, I didn't understand that dentistry was going to be this interesting, and that's really, really important.
Oh, it most certainly is. And here's another way to think about this, because we want to think differently about this stuff. You're bringing on somebody who was so successful based on their experience in another dental practice that they left. And now what you have to do is you have to take somebody and unlearn all of their processes. And they have to absolutely unlearn it. So, for example, they're coming in with a different practice management software system. Well, we did it this way at Dr. Moffet's practice, but why don't you guys do it that way? You're never going to untrain that stuff out of that person. All they're going to be is a boat anchor on your practice. I mean, we just really don't want to do that. What we'd much rather do is take a really smart person who is salivating for the opportunity of their lifetime to learn all this. What do you mean you're going to teach me all this? Oh, this is the best job ever. I can't wait. They come into your practice, they're enthusiastic and excited each day. And remember, we know they can do the job. That's the whole point of this. Before they ever get to your practice, we know they can do the job. So they show up, their natural strengths and talents are matched for the position, and voila, that's where the magic's made.
Always, as you mentioned right at the start, this is the way that the Ritz-Carlton works. This is the way that Disney works. They find good people and then they put them into the roles that they have for them, as opposed to finding people for the roles and then hoping that they're good people. And I think that's where it gets itself tangled up. And
It really does reduce the randomness and the risk for the practice. And we go further than even that report that I showed you, the insight report. We take it a step further. And once the finalist candidates pass through that process, we take the very finalists, we send them, we do a video interview. So our team conducts this. It doesn't require any work from the practice whatsoever. But we ask them a bunch of different questions. And we're not looking for necessarily what they say, believe it or not. We're looking for intangibles. How do they answer the questions? What's their, are they speaking eloquently? Are they using slang? How are they going to represent your practice? It doesn't matter what they look like. All that stuff is immaterial. But how are they really going to represent your practice? And when our team's looking at that, the sometimes those folks are rejected. Most of the time, we whittle it down to the top candidates and then send over the very top candidates to your practice. And at that point in time, we already know they can do the job. We know they can do the job with about 97% certainty. And of course, we guarantee it as well for 90 days, each position. And it doesn't matter why. If somebody leaves the position within 90 days, they're replaced for free. So when you take that approach and you have so much risk reduction, compare that to a resume. Compare that to having to do all of this yourself and having to try and get this level of results. I mean, in my own practice, I know I'm biased here, but in my own practice, I cannot imagine, nor will I ever have anything to do with hiring via resume again. We just don't do it.
You
It's
also
too
said
risky.
to me last week that the results of the people who come from Build My Team to your clients' practices in all industries, they stay longer, considerably longer.
Yeah, much longer. And that's pretty straightforward because we, first of all, have removed the obstacles for them to stay. They know all the hours, they know all the logistics, all of that stuff's done. We know they can do the job, so their natural strengths and talents fit the position. And the big thing, and you got to think about this from a random applicant's viewpoint. They are asked to show up in your practice each day for work and be themselves. Just be yourself. No, just be yourself. We already know you're going to do a terrific job. Just be yourself. Let me know what I can do to help you. And, we're going to train you. We're going to show you all this stuff. We know you learn really quickly, but just generally be yourself. They're not showing up each day as a round peg being asked to be hammered into a square hole. And I know that sounds like a platitude, but you got to think about it in terms of an entry level, like an admin type position. That's what they're going to be asked to do at every other place they apply. No wonder they stay longer,
Yeah,
a lot longer.
Dentistry is a great business because no customer wants to go to the dentist. Never. You're selling to people who don't want to be there.
Right.
And so if you can have a point of difference where
Yeah.
your team take the fear away, take the anxiety away, and just like having a chat all the time, everybody here's so friendly, was a mantra that we tried to live by in our office because it set us aside. And people are happy to pay a little bit more because people are nice to them.
Of course. Yeah. And also with those nice people, the folks that can follow the processes, it allows you to build your practice with people who can actually do what you want them to do. You are not running around with a spoon, holding it in front of their mouths, having to spoon feed employee after employee. You don't have to do that with these people. These are A players. You're bringing A players and B plus players to the table using our process. And they don't require anything close to the level of management that you're used to with those C players and those folks who just aren't really doing a great job. Not because they're bad people. Well, some of them might be, but most of them aren't bad people. They're just in the wrong position for themselves.
Such a game changer, Michael. No wonder you've had such great success in terms of getting people to the right job and then getting them to stay for longer, because churn is such again, the sweaty palms, the churn, it's horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, and what this does a wonderful job of is dramatically reducing that, and it lets you avoid that cascade effect where the dominoes start to fall. You lose one great person, and then you start to overwork your team, and you're really overworking. Oh man, we're looking so hard for the next person, and then you bring somebody in, and they turn out to be a dud. And then you try and tell your team members, oh, we're going to keep looking, and the whole time they're doing somebody else's job over and over. What happens to those A players? They're like, this guy is never going to get this right. I'm out of here. And that's what ends up happening. And then you have this massive cascade effect where now you've lost, let's say, two people, and you're doubling and tripling down on your existing team. With Build My Team, that is an avoidable situation, because as soon as you get wind that somebody's leaving your team, you call or email us on our side, and we get cracking on this immediately, and can provide pretty
Fantastic.
darn quick
Fantastic.
results.
It's it's again, and I'm sure you've seen these stories as well, where somebody's held on to a practice manager or an office staff member
Mm-hmm.
for years, more than they should have, because they were just scared of the hole that they might
Yep.
leave if they go, but they weren't the right fit to start off with. Yeah,
Yeah.
this just alleviates that whole problem.
Yeah. Well, remember that when you have these, like if you stratify your team members into A, B, C, and hopefully not D players, um, the A players only want to work with A players. The B players, or the A players, will tolerate the B players, but they're going to leave because of the C players. And so if you find yourself churning through people in your practice, one of the things that we would suggest is you take a look at, do you have a team full of like one or two great people, and then C players or even D players? Because those A players, they're not going to stand for that. They know they can get a job anywhere, and they know they can get a job very quickly. So what they're looking for, just as some advice for your listeners, they're looking for really decisive business owners that move quickly and can make these decisive decisions. And they're not, they really don't want to work with these C players. They want those folks to gently or otherwise exit the team and be replaced with people
Yeah,
who will do a great job.
it's interesting. That's the old Jack Welch principle, isn't it? That if you eliminate, fire the bottom 10%,
Yep,
and
fire the bottom
everybody
10%.
lifts up, and if
Yeah.
you fire the top 10%, sometimes all of a sudden B players become A players as well. Um, yeah, it's just yeah,
Mm-hmm.
interesting philosophy.
It sure is. And it works. It works incredibly well, especially in a private practice. And I also I wanted to note, I think that, I was shocked by this in our practice. The amount of runway that these A players can take. And what I mean by that is they don't require, like, you give them a problem and they're going to solve it. You don't have to tell them how to solve it. You put some guardrails on the road and such. But essentially, they can be so much more productive than you could possibly imagine, even in a dental practice. So, one of these A players might do 2 times, 3 times the amount of work, and they don't think anything of it. They're just being themselves all day long. So I'll give you an example. This is directly applicable from our practice, where I have exact numbers and such. But our our gross income went up by 50%, within a couple percent of that. We dropped from 14 people down to 10 and a half, so one part-time person, and our net income almost tripled. And you say, how the heck is that possible? Well, the people that we had on the team were not hired for these principles originally. We had to have most of the people on the team exit over a couple years, be replaced with these A and B players. And, there's that analogy of the bus, getting the right people on the bus. Well, we not only got the right people on the bus, but we also moved some people around from seat to seat on the bus. And what that produced for us was a team that can essentially run the practice themselves. The docs do the clinical work, but it is incredibly, incredibly effective.
Out of your team, so that you as the clinician can just do the clinical without having to be bogged down with the admin, either after hours, weekends, or instead of treating patients. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Exactly. It's a lot more fun too, David. We're sitting here talking about all this nitty gritty business stuff, but at the end of the day, what did we get into the healthcare professions for? Like, as a dentist, did you get into it to do dentistry or to herd cats and be a kindergarten teacher all day long? Of course not. That's where the better team members with the better natural strengths and talents for the position make your day so much more enjoyable.
Yeah,
It's hard to describe.
It's a pretty stressful job being a dentist. I don't know whether being an optometrist is the same.
Of course. Far less stressful than dentistry.
But
Yeah, much less
dentist,
stressful. Yeah. It has its days, but dentistry, I mean, dentistry is just a different animal than the other healthcare professions.
Michael, how do people get in touch with you to find out how you can get some candidates for them?
Yeah, so it's really easy. You go to buildmyteam.com, take a look at our website, browse around, and then schedule a consultation with one of our team members. It's free, of course. What our team members are going to do is they're going to find out about your practice, learn what you're looking for, and really help you streamline the positions that you want to hire so that we can get you great people. And at that point, you'll find out how affordable it is, much more than people think. And folks usually pull the trigger pretty quickly. And we start the search for your practice. Now, it's straightforward. So buildmyteam.com.
Difficulty is you only do work in the United States and Canada, or is that North America?
Well, North America, Canada, and the US. Yeah.
It's a shame that you haven't reached out to Australia yet, but we discussed the logistics of that. There's a lot of water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is, and it's an area we would love to take a look at in the near future. This is generally more American-based per se, but I mean, we're in the United States and Canada. Our results are very, very, very predictable. We have this dialed. We only do one thing, David, just one thing, but it's done over and over and over.
For any of our viewers and listeners who are not in North America, they can certainly gain some good principles for what they need to do in their own interviewing. It's difficult to automate some of this stuff themselves, but still just streamlining some of the things out so that you eliminate the many, just so that you only have to deal with a few, as opposed to deal with the many. And I think you said last week, you're great at finding needles in a stack of needles.
Right. That's what we do all day long. Find the right needle in a stack of needles.
Sometimes it's definitely what it feels like. You're looking for a needle in a haystack, and then you find just one, and you go, "That's the one." And of course, it's not the one.
Yeah,
it's a one.
Yeah,
that's all.
Yeah, exactly.
Michael, thanks very much for being a guest on the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to
it was so much fun, David.
Touch with me one day and say, "Hey, David, we want to work in Australia for Australian dentists. That'd be great." But in the meantime,
absolutely,
there's plenty of people in North America watching this podcast as well, and I'm sure they'll say this is the answer, and so they don't end up pulling their hair out.
Terrific.
Searching for the right stuff.
Yeah, we all need a little less stress in our lives.
Dr. Michael Neal, thanks for being a guest.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being a part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback Fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and keep on tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.